Welcome to Getting to Know Chronicle. I'm John Stoner, a member of the Adoption Engineering team at Google Cloud, and today we're going to start adding the outcome section to our multi-event rules and introduce aggregation, specifically counts, to our YARA-L rule. When we introduced outcomes, we used it with a single event rule. During that video, we mentioned that outcome variables could contain lists of values or calculated fields, but with a single event rule, there isn't much to list or calculate. With multi-event rules, we have more to work with. Today, we will cover two aggregation functions that can be used within the outcome section, count and count distinct. There are a number of other functions and we will get to them, but for this video, we will focus on these two. It's important to understand that when working with multiple events in a rule, that all outcome variables that contain UDM fields must have an aggregation associated with them. The syntax we will use is the outcome variable equals count or count distinct, followed by the UDM field or a placeholder variable inside parentheses. Finally, it's worth pointing out that any constants that you add to your outcome section do not require an aggregation function in front of them. You will see this in our video, but think of it this way. The constant is describing the entire detection, not a single UDM event. Therefore, we don't need to aggregate the values. With that brief overview, we're going to apply our outcome section to a password spray rule. Let's take a look at our current rule. The current rule is looking for Microsoft user login events with a block action, as you can see in the events section. We are grouping our detections by the match variable hostname over a 30-minute window, and we have a condition that says we need to have more than 10 unique user IDs within that window to trigger. So far, so good? Now, let's add some additional information to our detection. Much like our single event rule detection in our previous video, let's add a risk score of 65 and a MITRE ATT&CK technique of brute force password spraying. Notice that neither of these have an aggregation because they're both constants that describe the entire detection. Now, let's add two additional outcome variables. Even though we know that we want to detect when there are more than 10 unique users in our match window, let's get a count of the distinct user IDs in this detection, and while we're at it, let's get a count of the number of events that match our criteria for this spray. Notice in our two count aggregations that one is using a placeholder variable that we defined in the events section, and the other is using the full UDM field name. Either is valid, so use whichever one you'd like. When we test our rule, we will see that we get a few detections, and then by clicking on the columns button, we can add our 4 outcome fields to our results. The 2 outcome fields with the constants are as we define them, and with our 2 new outcome variables, we can see the unique number of users in our detection, as well as the number of events that matched our criteria as well. Count and count distinct are just 2 of the aggregate functions that can be used in the outcome section. Remember, all event values must be aggregated in rules that contain multiple values. To use these aggregate functions, they follow a common syntax. The outcome variable equals the aggregate function, like count, followed by parentheses with either the UDM event with the event variable in it, or a placeholder variable. Finally, constants do not require an aggregate function, even in multi-event rules. If you want to learn more about Chronicle, check out my blog series called New to Chronicle for more handy tips. We have a number of community YARA-L detections in our GitHub site and are continually adding more. And don't forget to engage the security community at googlecloudcommunity.com. Thanks.